So one of the most powerful phrases is that you know who you are. And whether you are an individual with the story or creating the story, it's extremely important that you live to that phrase. So even if you're not yet a Mary Spio, a Tristan Walker, a Felicia Hatcher, your story is extremely important. And so for me, what it comes down to is being focused on human capital. And when I started my first recruiting company back in 1998, one of the things that caught my attention without apology or permission was the bubble burst of 2001. Painful. Painful. And all of the recruiting that I do is in the high-tech space. High-tech salespeople in technology and telecommunications and software, those individuals that earn somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000 per year. That's what we do. But the piece that really got to me was this article right here when that bubble burst. And in 2002, what they did was they talked about the endangered species. In that article, it listed all of the talented individuals, some of the young, talented, rising titans between Baltimore and Richmond. I want you to understand, we're talking Baltimore, Maryland, 68% African American, DC, the chocolate city, down to Richmond. And inside of that article, they covered 3 years, 2001, 2002, 2003. There was not one African American. The lack of diversity. And so this entire conversation is not something that's new. You might hear about Intel's recent announcement of $300 million to change the diversity pipeline over the next 4 to 5 years. But you have to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a new conversation. So what we have to focus on is me making sure that I use this clicker the right way. That's number one. So no percentages, no quotas needed. It's just a matter of simply doing it. And because of a lack of time, I want to make sure that we move through all of the slides, because what's most important for me is that you understand what it takes to participate in the economy that Cold Fever, Black Tech Miami, Felicia, Derek, the team, and all of the other participants down in South Florida are trying to create. We need to move off of the only consumption side and become more of the participants in the creation side, as well as being employed inside of these organizations. So one of the things that I found in all of my recruitment, 17 years of placing talent. For every $10,000 that you rise in terms of compensation, you see a 7% decrease in representation of African Americans. So I want you to think about that for a moment. So if I'm moving $150,000 to $300,000 type talent, you can only imagine that it's a little bit different than someone working at a retail store or in hospitality. Correct? So we got work to do. So we need to make sure that we are participating inside of this industry, and it's not as a result that they're not concerned with it. Diversity management is a $1 billion space and will continue to grow. We got talented individuals, consultants and practitioners, and all of these individuals providing you with the insight necessary to bring you into their organizations, but somehow there is a disconnect. And the good reason for that disconnect is because we are, well, at least trying. You see, you got to understand that Intel just recently made the announcement for $300 million. But if you talk to their chief diversity officer, they will tell you that their numbers have not changed negligibly or a negligible change since 1998 in terms of diversity. So now how do you turn that ship? How do you make that better in a very short period of time? So your initiatives must have the right attitudes. Number one objective of any diversity and inclusion strategy is you must have individuals inside of the organization from a leadership perspective that are interested in driving that message. And you must make people that are capable or shall I say, place people that are capable into leadership positions. And they must have the skills and the resources. Many, many, many D&I organizations and initiatives are underfunded. So they sound great on paper, but they don't give them the resources that they need to help you and you and you move through the organization. One of the best companies that does have an D&I program is Intel and HP and some of the others. So it's not as if they're not trying. So let's focus on us for a moment. This is from Felicia a few weeks ago on Instagram. We need to make sure that we do what we need to do in order to be prepared. So the problem is this: we are absent from the equation. Right now, if I go to some of the historically black colleges and universities and I work through their career centers and work to try to recruit their students into a Facebook or a Google or an Airbnb, they will tell you without a shadow of a doubt the comp sci program at that school is far different than the comp sci program at other schools. So if you are a student at any school and you want to be inside of technology, what I would highly encourage you to do is to make sure that you have some sort of a mentor relationship, some level of connection with people from other schools so that you can find out exactly what their syllabus is. The meaning of this particular slide is real simple. Intel can make the announcement all day long, but they're not going to change that problem tomorrow. Google is not going to change that problem tomorrow. 50 to 90,000 employees inside of their organization. They recruit from Facebook and Apple and Microsoft. It's all a circle. And so until people start really falling off or moving outside of the country, it's going to be extremely hard for us to break in and to break in the numbers in which we need to break in. Does that make sense? So we got to do more to be prepared in the process. Bottom line for all of us is that these schools need to do and these companies need to do, and as entrepreneurs what we need to do, we got three things. Number one, Ms. Randy Zuckerberg's sister, she recently said somewhere that technology is no longer tech, it's just a way of life. Like every day. We just left a VIP session where they talked about cell phone usage in the continent of Africa and in various countries, and it's all over the place. Technology is just modern day life. So we have an obligation to make sure that we are playing in that process. Number two, we must hold them accountable. When they drop the press release and say that they want to invest the money, it's not good enough for us to simply tweet it and to tell other people about it and to keep repeating the story. You got to go back to these organizations and hold them accountable. I talked to Michael Seibel from Y Combinator last Thursday, and his only question to me was, Torin, I need more African Americans to join Y Combinator out west. So how can you help me get more African Americans to join the Combinator? They want to give you $125,000 to help get your organization going. But we got to be prepared when we get there. It is unacceptable for us to continue to complain about the absence of diversity when we are not doing enough to be prepared. Hold them accountable. And the third thing that's extremely important is that you don't have to be a technologist to make a difference. Most of these breakthrough technologies start in underserved and under-resourced communities. So look around and find out what's missing. Find out what it is that you can deposit inside of your organization, in your community. What can you do differently? Even if you currently have employment, become an entrepreneur. Let the business fund your dream until you are able to get it going off the ground. One of the things that has worked so extremely well for me over the years is that I have a high voltage process for creating connections. So when I engage and meet with new people, I immediately build rapport. And I do that whether I'm working with the candidate or a client, I treat them exactly the same. But with clients, they feel like, wow, this guy really understands the business. He's done his research. He knows what we need in terms of talent. He's helping me lay out my recruiting strategy. I trust him. When I get on the phone with candidates, I'm not trying to shove a job down their throat. I start every single conversation with, what are you looking for in your next move? And we go from there. You got to be willing to communicate with these individuals and find out what it takes for them to be successful, and they will bring you into your organization, bring you into their organization. We got a responsibility, and our story has to be heard. You have to know who you are. So once again, whether you are the Mary Spio or the Tristan Walker, whether you have the stage and the range and the reach of a David Banner or a Felicia Hatcher, you got to create a story. You got to bring that story to the equation. For me, the story started when I was extremely little. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and today that's what we are. Figure out what it is that you want so you can bring that to the equation and be a participant in the pursuit of progress, and not a person sitting on the sideline complaining because they've held me out. They cannot keep you out if you hold them accountable.
So I just have a few questions for Mr. Ellis. Mr. Ellis and I, first of all, go super, super, super way back. Over 10 years?
Over 10.
Over 10 years since I remember you hired me when I was in college, when I started my first business, an educational consulting company, to do some consulting for some of the students you were working with.
That's right.
In Baltimore, which was really cool. So we go super way back. So I've been watching Torin for a very long time, super, super, super impressed. And I just got a few questions for you. Sounds good? So talk to me about, I know here, especially in Miami, and it's probably the issue all over the place, we have a huge brain drain problem that we talk about all the time. The colleges are graduating the students and outputting them, but we don't have, they're not staying because they're not seeing the opportunity. So maybe from a government standpoint, maybe from a institution of higher education and corporations, what can they do to kind of help facilitate and raise human capital and keep them in their cities?
So first thing that they can do, if we are talking about organizations, whether they be governmental or private industry, I think that it's extremely important that they create cultures that are inviting. Okay. So you have to understand that Silicon Valley has done a phenomenal job of creating a culture that if you come out here, you're going to make some things happen. We know and understand that from the work that we're doing in Baltimore, that raising money in Baltimore is harder to do there than it is for us to do in New York City or in Silicon Valley or even down in Austin, Texas. So I think the first thing that organizations must do, or governmental organizations, is they have to create a culture that says, we want you here. But companies have to do a better job of making sure that they take care of their employees. Right. You understand that 10, 20 years ago, there were 484,000 bank tellers. Today, there's 321,000, and that number continues to decline. Robots are coming into play. We had someone on the stage wearing wearable technology. I read an article on the plane yesterday that said 50% of all of the employment that we have in the US right now is going to be replaced by a robot or some other piece of technology within the next 5 to 10 years. So you got to understand that with those types of statistics hanging over people's heads, they are going to try to do, it's fight or flight. Either I can fight to make it happen here in South Florida, or I'm going to go into an organization or a city where I'm a bit more welcome. So I think culture is the #1 thing, and then we can kind of build from there.
Okay. So it's a lot to do as far as, if we talk about the individual a little bit, like how do you secure yourself in a time where there is no loyalty from any corporation?
How do you secure yourself when there's no loyalty?
Oh man, I mean, essentially because of the economy, especially after 2008.
Right.
You know, my parents had a job forever.
Right.
Right. Now the average is what, 2 to 3 years?
If that.
If that. So how do you secure yourself from a marketability standpoint with the companies, especially the ones that you're placing?
So the way that I work with candidates, I shared with you a moment ago, I asked one question in the beginning. But what I didn't tell you is that before we even begin to engage in that conversation, one of the first things that I will say to them is that I recruit with a process. And the process for me is knowledge, opportunity, and financial gain, and in that order. So I focus on knowledge and the opportunity. So if I am going to present them with a job opportunity, it's got to be more rewarding for them mentally. And the reason why I focus on that is because that's what you bring. That is your capital. That's what you bargain with. That knowledge, that skill set, those experiences, that's what you get to take to the equation so that you can do your negotiation. And so when you talk about how do they solidify their position, if you have nothing to bring to me, we're not having a conversation. And the employer is not interested in keeping you. That's the problem. So we have to make sure that we bring something to the equation, and it's all about how we position ourselves. When I work and coach with a candidate, I don't tell them to ask these 5 interview questions. We work with a strategy on how do you position yourself in that conversation so that when you and I exit, you walk to your back on your desk and you evaluate me against all the other candidates, you absolutely put my people to the top. Okay. It's a process.
Okay, cool. So what I've noticed over the past, I think, 2 years is all of a sudden we've really started bragging about being in a knowledge economy. And I constantly say, that's nothing to brag about. We need to be bragging about being in an applied knowledge economy, where, like you said, we bring value to every situation that we walk into. Can you just talk about the importance of educational institution putting out more students that understand how to apply the knowledge that they're learning?
So I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, organizations that I recruit for will tell you that they don't hire people that are smart. Google is smart. Not Google the company, Google the platform. That's smart. So like literally I can sit in Google and I can find anything that I want. So what organizations, or shall I say institutions, and it's a very good question because what I didn't get to on the slides is that I'm a co-founder of a company that matches job seekers with the internal assets at a company. And what we believe is that if you and I are engaged in a relationship over a period of time, you will find me to be a better and more rewarding candidate. What institutions like HBCUs and some of the other schools that are outside of the larger metropolitan areas, they are under-resourced and underfunded. But schools in general, across the board, they have to move off of the metric of, let me just simply get this student in and collect the $10, $20, $30, $100,000 that they have to give for tuition, and they must have a better sense of commitment to the exit plan, period. And if I were you, if I was an individual considering a school, if they can't show me what that exit plan looks like, that's not the school that I would be attending. So I think for all students, the number one thing is when you look at schools, find out what the Career Center is doing. What's their placement ratio? Find out what department heads are doing to create linkages to business, to create linkages to private industry, to create linkages to SBIR programs. That's what they need to be doing so that they can have those conversations with you so that while you are matriculating through the process, you understand that at the end of this tunnel, there's some light for you.
So let me ask you this. Do you find it ironic that the Career Center is usually one of the smallest places on a college campus?
I don't know if it's ironic, but I would definitely call it disappointing.
Right.
It's extremely disappointing, and even worse than that, it's disappointing when you contact the Career Center and you attempt to work with them. It's extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. And when I go around to the colleges and universities and I talk to the students at the various campuses, they will tell me that they really don't even cater to the Career Center. So it's like, what is happening? So it's really a disappointing thing. I don't even call it ironic. It's just very disappointing the relationship that they have with the students and the amount of result that they are able to do. I went to an HBCU 2 weeks ago, and they were holding a job fair, and I was there to prepare their students for the job fair. And on the list of companies, literally 4 or 5 were fast food restaurants, 2 were in hospitality. I think 1 was in financial services. And then the others were in retail, if you will. There was no technology, no cybersecurity companies. And just in the state of Maryland, we have open now 125, 150,000 cybersecurity jobs. People are suggesting that in the capital region or in the mid-Atlantic that cybersecurity is going to be larger than the Pentagon. So you might not know what the Pentagon looks like, but just Google it. Just look at how many employees are there, and they are saying that in our neck of the woods, I live in Baltimore, that cybersecurity is going to be larger than the Pentagon. So that applies to you down in South Florida, because you got folks now sitting at home. They ain't robbing banks. They doing it through hacking through ATM machines and collecting $5, $10, $7 million sitting at home with their computer. So I need everybody in the room could be hired in cybersecurity today, and we still wouldn't make a dent in the problem that we have. So it's just a matter of tying what we're doing right now to where there's a book out that's it's an old book. Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes.
Cheese is getting moved. You just got to make sure you can find it.
Right. All right, so we have time for maybe 1 or 2 really quick questions, if anyone has a question. Right here.
Can you speak to the importance of internships? We talked about applying the importance of internships in preparing students for just being able to engage the marketplace where there's value add?
Absolutely, and internships are something that should be sought out immediately, sooner rather than later. I shared with you a moment ago that I'm a co-founder of See Future, SEEfuture.com, and that's exactly what we do. And the reason we do that is because 60% of employers will tell you that most new hires that are undergraduates are underprepared. They're lacking the hard skills and the soft skills that employers are looking for. So what my co-founder and I decided to do was we created a platform that would allow all of these individuals to come through on one side and connect with the employees inside of the companies on the other side. We use video technology, text-based technology, so that they can get coached and mentored. And what we want to see happen is that over a period of time, they will be better prepared candidates. Here's the deal. At the World Economic Summit last year in Davos, they said that 300,000 college graduates were working for minimum wage. 300,000. That's a poor proposition on a $100,000 education. And part of that is because they are unprepared for the workforce. So the internship, your question, in and of itself, critical.
Okay, go ahead. She can yell.
So we started with knowing your story. The title slide was chasing, and you saw that I had K-N-O-W, right? It's about chasing your story, and inside of that, there's a dichotomy. There's the history of who you used to be and the present of who you are and the vision of where you are attempting to go. Stay thirsty. That's what's going to allow you to become. You got to be flexible. Too often times we kind of get pigeonholed into what it is that we do. And so if your foundation is politics, as you say, just read up on everything politics. You know, continue to do things that are outside of the norm, looking at syllabuses from various colleges and universities in political science, researching the political parties and the types of things and questions that they ask on nightly news programs, whatever it takes to continue to push you forward. That's what's going to make you a richer individual, if you will. So there's really no rocket science to the process. It's just about being committed. You know what? One of the things that's so frustrating is that when we look at diversity and inclusion strategies, when we look at growth, so oftentimes people get tired. diversity and inclusion is there's no end line in diversity and inclusion. It is ongoing. You understand? So I always say to people that life is like wrestling a gorilla. You don't get tired you don't quit when you get tired. You quit when the gorilla gets tired. Does that make sense?
All right, so I am getting the signal to wrap up, but I have to ask you this last question. If you can give, especially to the students here or the people that are kind of transitioning, some hiring hacks. Because I remember I saw you, I think when you talked about I don't even want to spoil it for you, but when you talked about people providing references for companies to call, and you're like, yeah, I don't do references. I'm looking on your LinkedIn, I'm finding some people, and I'm calling them so I can find out who you really are. Are there any more hacks?
So the number one hack that I would give for anyone who is trying to get employed, one of the things that I try to do is I need you to submit yourself or be somebody different than the candidate. So if you want to work for an organization, I want you to call that organization, and I can assure you that the job probably says we don't take phone calls, right? So I want you to call, and I want you to find out who is the hiring manager at a particular organization, and I want you to tell them that you're a student doing a research paper on whatever it is. And you can use my name. You can be me during that particular call. And let them know that you want to send an email to them. The point for this is you have to get engaged in communication. You cannot hide behind a keyboard and think that you are going to be successful. You understand? So all of the hacks that I would have in terms of Felicia's question is work in LinkedIn, work in all of your social media channels, but you have to use some level of authority, if you will, and you have to break the rules just a tad bit in order to get to where you need to be. But LinkedIn is a treasure trove. Everything you need is there. We're talking 500 million people plus everything is there. No references. I don't believe in references. I don't. You can send me 5 references. I'm not calling any of those people. I'm going to call people that you used to work with. So use LinkedIn and get through. Use hashtags to find organizations on Twitter that are hiring. When you want to do politics, go in and put in some of the different things that are happening in the political arena with a hashtag and find out who's tweeting about it, research that individual, look at the papers that they've written. Those are the ways that we stay current and we keep moving ourselves forward creatively.
Awesome. Give Torin Ellis a round of applause.